Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org.
Boise State Public Radio and Duck Club Entertainment present the Charlie Hunter Trio.
Charlie Hunter Trio, everybody.
Wednesday, March 18th at the Shrine Social Club in Boise. Blending jazz, funk, blues, and rock, Hunter is a guitarist, producer, and bandleader who will present his unique finger-picking technique on custom hybrid guitars. Tickets are available now at theduckclub.com.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. It's Friday, which means it's time for our Reporter Roundtable. This is, of course, when we get you updated on the news that made headlines around our region this week. And today, our panel includes Kevin Richert, senior reporter and blogger with Idaho Education News, Emma Epperly with Idaho Education News, and Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun. And we are starting off today with Kevin. Kevin, welcome back to the show. Good to have you here.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin. Okay, I can hear you now. I didn't know if, live radio. Sometimes we hear each other, sometimes we don't.
It's not here in the State House. It's busy over here.
All right, I get it. Speaking of the State House, there is a lot going on. So can we, let's just scratch the surface a bit and start with the bill that would have required that public schools count protest walkouts as unexcused absences. Now, a lot of students actually turned out for this one. What did this bill say?
Right. You summed it up well. What that bill would have done would have required schools to treat student walkouts as an unexcused absence. And like you say, students showed up to testify against it, and ultimately the House Education Committee wound up killing it on a 7-7 tie vote. That probably means that the issue is dead for the session.
Okay, so probably dead for this session. Any idea if we could see it come back next session, or just too soon to tell?
It's always possible. What happens next year it's a long way away. We've got enough this year to deal with right now. But I would imagine that with the tenor of the times, that it's quite possible that you would see this come back. I mean, if you see continued protests on whatever the issue of the day is between now and next January, sure, this could come back next year.
So, Kevin, House Republicans are also trying again with a bill to stop school districts from deducting union dues from teacher pay. So what exactly would this bill do?
This would, and we've seen this bill before. This has been pushed by a Washington state-based group for several sessions. And what it would do is it would basically, the school districts would no longer be able to deduct union dues from a teacher paycheck. They would not be able to offer school employees paid time off to conduct union activities. It did pass the House on a pretty strong majority on Tuesday. The vote was 45-23. It now goes over to the Senate. I'm not sure what will happen with this in the Senate because, as I recall, like I said, we've seen this issue before, and I don't recall it ever gaining very much traction in the Senate. But like I said, it passed the House on Tuesday.
So, Kevin, when we talk about unions, is this just for teachers, or does this apply to any union?
It depends on how you read it. I mean, it's targeting unions per se, but it also carves out fire unions and police unions. And that was part of the consternation, I think, about this bill, is that it felt like it is more directed at the teachers' unions.
So, Kevin, Idaho's colleges, as we know, they are struggling to absorb budget cuts as the legislature is continuing to try to balance the books. And in fact, Boise State is the latest school that is trying to save money. So can we talk about what they're planning to do? And are we looking at cutting staff? Are we looking at taking away programs? There's a lot going on here.
There is, and what we reported on first on Tuesday was a pretty significant restructuring in Boise State, and two things are going to happen under this restructuring. Boise State is going to combine its College of Education with its School of Public Service, and full received a degree from the School of Public Service. It takes in political science, it takes in criminal justice, it takes in public policy and public admin. Uh, that would be combined into what they're calling a College of Education and Public Service.
Mm.
The other thing that they're going to do, and this is pretty significant if you've been watching Boise State over the past few years, it would eliminate the College of Innovation and Design. And this was a pretty heavily ballyhooed program when it was unveiled about a decade ago. I think it was launched in 2015. What Boise State is saying is that they feel like they can do the innovation under the roofs of the various academic departments across campus. They feel like there will still be innovation. It will just happen under the other colleges, that they don't feel like they need a standalone college to do innovative work and to try to get academic programs to work together on innovation.
So, Kevin, when they merge, let's talk about the College of Education and Public Policy merging. Do we know if that means that they will be cutting staff?
Hard to say, and probably not immediately we'll see cuts in staff. I did have the chance to talk to interim president Jeremiah Shin on Wednesday, and that was the question I asked. What's going to happen with staff and what's going to happen with dollars? And as far as dollars are concerned, they don't really know how much money they're going to save, that it will take time. As for staff, it doesn't seem like there are any plans, and he was pretty clear that for the time being, there's no plans to get rid of staff or faculty. These folks will be moved around and kept on the job, but you may see changes along the way as staff leave. You may see attrition, and you may see positions that are just not filled as they become dark. Now, immediately, you're going to see two fewer deans at Boise State University, and one has already announced that she's planning to leave. The dean of the public service school has taken a job in Los Angeles at a college down there. So immediately you'll see two administrative positions go away. You may see other positions just not get filled as time goes on.
So, Kevin, can we talk about the College of Innovation and Design then, because it's going away completely? Does that mean come the new fiscal year, July 1, this college will no longer exist? And I guess, does that mean all of the staff go away? And I think it's fair to note that I believe former BSU President Bob Custra created this College of Innovation and Design. So a lot of hoopla, as you said, around this when it came to be.
And some star power. It wasn't just that it was a Bob Custra innovation, if you will. Gordon Jones was brought in, a former Harvard instructor. Gordon Jones was brought in as the founding dean of the College of Innovation and Design. And if that name sounds familiar, Gordon Jones is now the president at the College of Western Idaho. So this was definitely a really high-profile program that was created under Custra. Like I say, launched about a decade ago. As for staff and as for faculty, it sounds like there are not going to be immediate cuts in staff or faculty from this College of Innovation and Design, that folks will be moved around again to other parts of the university. So that's what they're saying at this point. So not an immediate effect on staff or faculty.
Okay, and then let's head to Pocatello, because my understanding is that Idaho State University already made some budget cuts. So what's happened there?
They've cut about 44 positions, I want to say, and this
Wow.
was partly driven by the budget cuts and the budget debates that we're seeing at the State House that are going on even as we speak on Friday afternoon. So, 44 positions cut at Idaho State. The University of Idaho has said that it would need to cut, or it might impact a similar number of staff positions up there if the cuts go through as proposed at the legislature. So a lot of changes and a lot of turmoil and a lot of upheaval at the colleges and universities, and not just the four-year schools. I wrote about this last week, that the College of Eastern Idaho, that's a two-year school in Idaho Falls, it is growing rapidly. It is really exploding over there. They're having to eliminate positions They're also having to cut back the number of students that they can take into programs such as a nursing program, a really high end program. So you are seeing this affecting staff and you're seeing it affecting students already. And as the session unfolds and as there's more debate over budget cuts and as maybe some of these proposed budget cuts go into fruition, you may see other cuts and other impacts on staff and students. Not the least of which
So,
effect
Kevin,
on students is that this almost inevitably is going to lead to a tuition increase come next fall.
oh, absolutely. So we've been following the budget fights at the legislature here on Idaho Matters during the session. We haven't really dug in, though, to what this means for education. We just covered what's going on in higher ed. Oh, do you have any idea what this could potentially look like for K through 12?
That's the interesting thing. For the most part, K-12 has been left whole. They've been exempted from the budget cuts, not just Governor Little's budget cuts, but the cuts that have been proposed by the legislature. So the legislature, with the cuts that they are talking about, would not just exempt K-12. I think they also are keeping Medicaid and state police and corrections off the table in terms of cuts. Now, what that means is, think about your home finances. If you
Mm-hmm.
leave some parts of your budget whole, it's going to have an outsized effect on other pieces of your budget. And that's kind of where higher ed is right now. It is going to take a disproportionate hit from any of the budget cuts that are being proposed at the legislature, just because you're taking a lot of the budget off of the table in terms of areas where you could cut.
Kevin, I want to talk now about this deep dive that you took yesterday into the upcoming GOP primary, because you said in your article that on the legislative side, it is going to be even more unpredictable than ever. So why is that?
For a lot of reasons. I mean, first of all, you've got a lot of hotly contested primaries looming in May. You have rematches. You have folks who, in one case, you have a legislator in Pocatello and Blackfoot, I want to say. Julianne Young is running for re-election after losing by 4 votes in 2024. She is one of several former legislators who's running again. You have a lot of kind of high-profile races. You have a House member, Lori McCann, who is probably one of your moderate House Republicans, running for the Senate, where she's opposing Dan Foreman, Republican from Moscow, who is one of the hardline conservatives in the Senate. So you've got a lot of ideological races. You've got a lot of rematches, grudge matches. You've got a lot of money that we expect to see spent in these races, not just the money that candidates raise, but third-party money. And it's a weird political year because you've got some
Yeah.
really heated legislative races and you have very little in the way of statewide races looking ahead to the primary. It's a really strange ballot that emerged last week.
So, Kevin, are there certain races that folks should be watching in particular when we're looking at some incumbents who are going to be filling some heat this year by some challengers, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I think there are races to watch in the Treasure Valley. I think there are a couple of races in the Caldwell area that are going to be worth watching. One of those rematch races is the Senate race in Caldwell. Camille Blaylock is running for re-election. She's running for a second term, being opposed by Chris Tragel. Blaylock narrowly in 2024. They'll meet again. Similar kind of dynamic in CUNA. Chris Bruce is a first-term House member from CUNA. He defeated Melissa Durant, the incumbent, by fewer than 100 votes 2 years ago. So we're talking about very low turnout races, very close races. Every vote counts. Durant is running against Bruce again in that district. So those are just a couple in this part of the state that are going to be worth watching on May 19th. And, like you say, I've got a full rundown of this, the full elections page on our website that's got all the current information. It's going to be a very busy primary at the legislative level, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kevin, so appreciate you taking time. I know how busy you are, especially being at the State House today. So thanks for your time today. And as Kevin mentioned, the primary is May 19th. And if you want more information on these matchups, do go to idahoednews.com and write and read Kevin's deep dive into that. So, Laura, Idaho lawmakers are again debating the future of the Idaho Commission on Hispanic Affairs. This is after a new bill was introduced that would phase out its state funding over the next few years. So, Laura, for people who might not be familiar with it, what does the Idaho Commission on Hispanic Affairs do, and how is it funded right now?
The Commission on Hispanic Affairs is kind of an office under the governor's office, and it does outreach with the Hispanic community and does things like a youth leadership summit, which is open to all students in Idaho. But in the past has also done outreach around like healthcare and law enforcement and things like that to just kind of serve as a connection between state government and Idaho's Hispanic population. Right now, it has about a little over $280,000 worth of kind of state general funds, so just kind of the general pot of money for the state, and that pretty much funds two employees, and then the office, and then some of their activities.
So, folks who are supporting this bill, Laura, say that eliminating the funding would save about $80,000 in state general funds. Why do they believe the commission shouldn't receive state money anymore?
Yeah, the proposal that came up this week is something that was recommended by an interim DOGE committee, which is named after the Federal Department of Government Efficiency. And the argument that was made, especially in those DOGE meetings, was that this isn't the role of government. They likened it to the DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it kind of targets one certain group of people. And the Hispanic Commission does raise some private funding to support its work, but so basically the argument was made, well, it's important to have this connection with the state to give it legitimacy, but they can basically backfill the funds with private money instead.
So, Laura, some lawmakers, including Republicans, though, have expressed some skepticism about this proposal. I'm curious about what concerns they're raising about phasing out the commission's funding.
Yeah, the hearing this week was really, it was called an introductory hearing, and it really just allows it to come back for a public hearing. And a lot of folks said, they'd support it to come back for a hearing. They can have the conversation, but they are really skeptical, yet, like you said, of actually getting rid of or defunding the commission, because they say it does important work. And Idaho is about 13-14% Hispanic. They say that it does the good work of making sure people are getting the services that they need. And they also, don't think it really sends a very good message to the community. And like you said, $80,000 in state general funds isn't really the savings that I think a lot of these lawmakers are looking for.
Well, and Laura, this isn't the first attempt to target the commission this session. So how does this current proposal differ from the earlier effort that failed?
So earlier in the session, very early in the session in January, in a different committee, there was a bill that was proposed that would have just completely eliminated the commission. It would have just deleted the part of state code that created it. That was brought to the House State Affairs Committee. It ultimately, it did not get introduced, so it couldn't come back for a public hearing. And it also would have been different in that this proposal this week would kind of give a couple of years, I suppose, for the money to go away. I think with the idea that they would be able to kind of use that time to get more private support.
Emma, let me bring you into the conversation. So, you recently wrote about some Idaho schools saying that the rollout of our state's new early reading test, which is called the Idaho Reading Indicator, has had some unexpected hiccups. I mean, we're talking microphone problems to, students accidentally clicking out of the test. So, first, what changed with the new Idaho Reading Indicator test this year, and how is it different from the previous assessment that was used?
Yeah, so the Idaho Reading Indicator is a test that is given twice a year to all Idaho students in grades K through 3. And the test previously was multiple choice. So students logged
Mm.
onto a computer, selected the answer they thought was right off of a list of options, right? This new test, students read sentences off of a computer, then back to that computer. So they're talking to the computer, and so they don't have that option to just pick an answer. So the State Department has kind of argued that this is testing a higher level of knowledge from students.
And several districts, Emma, have reported technical problems. And we're talking things like iPad cases interfering with microphones, and then, as I mentioned, I mean, students clicking out of the browser tabs, right? So they're clicking out of the test completely. Um, how widespread, though, are these issues across Idaho schools?
Yeah, so the origin for this story is these test results came out a few months ago, but then last month we got individual grade level data for specific school districts. So, for example, in Boundary County, 11% of kindergartners scored as reading at or above grade level. And
Hmm.
so the origin of this story for me was I went and looked through this data and found anomalies where, you know, there's one grade level at a school that just did really poorly. And then I reached out to these districts and asked what happened. In Boundary County, their kindergartners were the lowest in the state, far lower than their other grades. And so, what their testing coordinator said is that the iPad cases, they have iPads they test their kindergartners on, those cases were muffling the sound of the
Mm.
students reading. And so the platform didn't capture their voices accurately. And so obviously that's a specific example at one school, but a variety of districts had issues, and a lot of those issues had to do with the platform hearing students. So I talked to a charter school and then West Ada, the state's largest school district. They went ahead and purchased headsets with attached microphones
Mm.
for students so that the audio would be picked up better by the platform. And, that's not free. West Ada spent about $200,000 to
Wow.
buy the equipment and roll it out. And that's not something that they necessarily budgeted for. So that was a concern that was raised. So even if we're not seeing an impact in the results at some school districts, they might have made an investment to kind of preempt the problem.
Hmm.
um, it's also important to note this is the first year rollout of this new test. So normally students are tested in September. Instead, this year they were tested a month later in October. And while there might have been individual issues at specific schools, the Idaho Department of Education says that they feel confident in the results overall and feel that yeah, there are places to fine tune, but they expect the results to just get more accurate as time goes on.
Well, and in your reporting, Emma, I mean, state education officials are calling this essentially a learning year, right, for this new exam. And you mentioned some of those changes and adjustments, for example, what West Ada did. Um, do you know if there's anything else that the state ed department is going to do before this next round of testing happens in the fall? Or is it just a matter of learning the system?
Yeah, so the State Department is doing additional trainings for school districts. One thing that different districts are playing with is the testing group size. So I want you to imagine you're in a room of 30 kindergartners and they
Oh,
all are reading out loud to a computer. I think
wow.
most people imagine that being quite loud, and I think that's been the case for some school districts. So they're testing in smaller groups, maybe
Mm.
um, 4 or 5 students, while other students are working on a virtual assignment. Other school districts are maybe spreading kids out when they're testing them. So they might be testing the whole class, but they're doing it in 2 rooms versus 1. So school districts are playing with what's going to work for them and for their classroom. Teachers are figuring it out. Most school districts, while this statewide, they're only required to take it twice a year, do use this exam um, monthly for students. So they're familiar with it. Their familiarity is growing. So there's additional training, and we'll see what the results are in the spring.
All right. Thanks for that. Laura, I've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to hit on this story that you wrote about recently. And this has to do with Idaho House Committee voting down a bill that would have narrowed how the state defines child neglect. Can we just start with the basics? What would this bill actually have changed about our state's definition of child neglect?
Sure. So the bill right now, or the law right now, is pretty much child neglect is any situation where a child it doesn't have the care or the substance or the medical care that they need that's necessary for their well-being. And it's directly because of their parent or guardian either not doing what they need to do or doing something that actively is going against their well-being. The bill would have narrowed this to really require that either harm had already occurred or there was an imminent risk of it, which is just a higher standard in terms of the law.
But Laura, prosecutors and child advocates pushed back pretty strongly. What were their biggest concerns about narrowing that definition?
Yeah, so the supporters were basically saying, the bill supporters were saying that it's too vague right now, and parents were getting caught up in kind of minor situations. But prosecutors were saying that the child protection system really works best if children can be removed before something really serious happens, and that really saves a lot of harm for the kids. So a prosecutor, an Ada County prosecutor, basically said that this would really make her job of protecting children a lot more difficult if they had to reach this much higher standard.
And the bill ultimately failed in committee by a really close vote. So very quickly, Laura, does that tell us anything about how divided lawmakers are on this issue?
It definitely does. I mean, I think parental rights and strengthening them is a main focus and usually has a lot of support in the Idaho legislature, especially among Republicans. But the line of where that intersects with child safety is something that people have disagreement on terms of, whether parents are getting their kids taken away for these minor instances or if children are going to be left in these maybe potentially harmful situations for too long. I think that's where a lot of the disagreement was.
And I want to thank all our reporters this week for their hard work and for really sharing their time with us, including Kevin Richert, senior reporter and blogger with Idaho Education News, Emma Epperly, also with Idaho Education News, and Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Idaho Matters. And for quick news of the day, start your mornings with our podcast. It's called The Connector, Idaho Daily News. And if this episode meant something to you, text it to a friend.